So I mentioned earlier that copyright is a bundle of exclusive rights, but that those exclusive rights are limited by certain exceptions and limitations. One of the important exceptions that many people have heard of is the exception of fair use. If someone falls within the category of fair use, then they are allowed to make use of your work without any payment to you and without having to ask your permission. But fair use is a fairly narrow exception, and it's difficult to predict ahead of time whether or not a use will be considered to be a fair use. Another limitation, though, to the exclusive right, which affects musicians across the board much more frequently, is what's called the compulsory license to record your song. If you've written a composition and your composition has already been recorded and released to the public, anyone else is entitled to make a cover recording, their own version of your song, and they don't have to ask your permission. What they do have to do is pay you the statutory rate set forth in the Copyright Act. And usually even those mechanicals are administered through the Harry Fox agency, which represents music publishers. Right, if your cover constitutes a fair use, then you don't have to get permission, you don't have to pay anything. It's very difficult to determine in advance whether a given use is going to be a fair use or not. Fair use is designed to be an equitable rule of reason that courts are supposed to decide on a case-by-case basis whether it's fair to allow someone to use your work without your permission. The Copyright Act sets forth 4 statutory factors that are supposed to serve as guidelines for the courts to consider in determining whether or not a given use is fair. And those factors aren't exclusive. The court can consider other factors as well. Those factors include, probably the most important of those 2 factors are, first of all, what is the nature of the use? If the use is transformative, such as if it's a parody or criticism, that tends to count in favor of fair use. And then the 4th factor is the effect of the use on the market for the work. If the work is going to substitute in the market for your work, if it would compete with your work, then that will count against fair use.